Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a massive leap forward in how we actually talk to artificial intelligence. We're looking at OpenAI's brand new release, GPT-Live, and its counterpart, GPT-Live-1 Mini. This isn't just your standard run-of-the-mill software update. It is a fundamental revolution in voice AI that brings us incredibly close to genuine, real-time human conversation. So, let's jump right in and see how this all works.
Okay, let's dive into this. Have you ever been talking to your voice assistant? You're trying to gather your thoughts. Maybe you take a quick breath to find that perfect word, and suddenly, bam, the AI just cuts you off with this clunky, robotic response. It completely derails your train of thought, right? Well, that awkward, disjointed feeling isn't a glitch. It's actually a direct result of how older AI voice models were built from the ground up. To really grasp why GPT-Live is such a game changer today, we've got to look back at the architecture we've been stuck with up until now.
Section 1. The Voice AI Evolution. Let's start with the older, what we call cascaded voice systems. Imagine this setup like a clumsy three-part relay race for every single word you say. First, a speech-to-text model transcribes your voice into flat text. Then, a large language model reads that text and writes out a response. Finally, a completely separate third model turns that generated text back into audio. And sure, this let us talk to early models, but it had some major flaws. Because your voice was flattened into text right at step 1, all your emotional nuance, a heavy sigh, a sarcastic tone, a quiet whisper, or even just your speaking pace, was completely lost, stripped away. The AI just saw words on a blank page. Plus, passing data across 3 totally distinct models meant the responses were notoriously, painfully slow. You'd speak, wait several seconds in total silence, and then finally get a response that often entirely missed the vibe of what you were trying to say.
So, to fix that brutal lag, developers moved to the next phase, which was turn-based models, like the original advanced voice mode. These models processed audio inside a single engine. That made things way faster, absolutely, because data wasn't jumping between 3 different systems anymore. But the interaction was basically like using a walkie-talkie. The AI rigidly waited for you to stop speaking before it could take its turn, and it relied purely on detecting dead air to know you were actually finished. So if you paused to think of a word, or if a dog barked in the background or a door slammed, the AI just assumed you let go of the walkie-talkie button. It would misfire, it'd jump right in and interrupt you at the absolute worst times because it literally couldn't tell the difference between a thoughtful pause and the actual end of your sentence.
And this brilliantly illustrates the contrast. When we look at these eras side by side, the evolution is stark. Notice how the cascaded and turn-based models rely entirely on discrete, rigid turns. They simply do not handle interruptions well, making the latency feel either frustratingly slow or just barely passable. But look at the full-duplex architecture powered by GPT-Live. Instead of discrete turns, it's continuous processing. The latency is lightning fast, the interaction feels highly expressive, and finally, it handles those awkward pauses and overlapping speech naturally. It's a complete paradigm shift from sequential steps to simultaneous awareness.
Section 2. Understanding full-duplex architecture.
So, the crucial point here is understanding what full duplex actually means. It's the ability for a system to process input and generate output at the exact same time. It is listening to you and speaking to you simultaneously. This officially moves us from that clunky walkie-talkie era into the realm of a natural phone call. Because the AI is making decisions many times a second, it can now use what linguists call backchanneling. That means it drops in those short, reassuring little verbal nods like, right, or yeah, while you're speaking. It suddenly lets you know it's following along without actually cutting you off, perfectly mimicking human psychology. And hey, if you interrupt it mid-sentence to correct a detail, no problem. It gracefully stops speaking, listens to your correction, and adjusts its response right on the fly. It doesn't get confused, and it definitely doesn't force you to start your whole prompt over from scratch.
Section 3. The Power of Delegation. Let's move on and see how this builds using a restaurant analogy, because this is how the system keeps from freezing up when things get complicated. Think of the front-end model, GPT-Live, as a highly charismatic, attentive waiter at your table. It maintains the flow of the chat, says and keeps the timing completely natural and engaging. But when you ask for something incredibly complex, like say a deep reasoning math problem, writing a massive block of code, or running a heavy web search, the waiter doesn't stop and cook the meal right there at your table, right? It delegates that heavy lifting to the master chefs in the kitchen. And in this case, that back-end chef is the GPT 5.5 frontier model. While GPT 5.5 is churning through that hard problem in the background, GPT-Live stays right there with you on the front end. It might say, let me look into that for you, or just actively listens to your follow-up thoughts. It keeps the conversation flowing seamlessly until the chef hands over the final answer, and then the waiter delivers it right back to you.
Section 4. proving the performance. Now let's look at the hard data. In head-to-head blind testing, human evaluators were given matched 5 to 10-minute conversational tasks to see how these architectures actually felt in practice, and they overwhelmingly preferred GPT-Live over the older advanced voice mode. Evaluators specifically pointed to its superior turn-taking and its exceptionally natural flow. But most importantly, they noted a near-total lack of those jarring interruptions we used to get every time we took a breath. Because the system is continuously listening while it speaks, it simply feels far less frustrating and just much more pleasant to interact with for extended periods. It doesn't feel like you're carefully managing a machine anymore. It literally just feels like you're talking.
And it turns out it's highly capable at the heavy lifting too. Thanks to that GPT 5.5 delegation we just talked about, GPT-Live-1 performed exceptionally well on automated benchmarks. It showed significant improvements in GPQA, which tests expert-level science reasoning. It also excelled in browse comp for agentic web searching, and interestingly, it crushed previous models on an internal benchmark called Tau3's Voice Telecom, which specifically tests the ability to navigate complex multi-turn customer support workflows. So it's pairing that flawless conversational timing on the front end with deep, rigorous logic on the back end. You absolutely do not have to sacrifice intelligence for conversational speed anymore.
Section 5. Real-world use cases. Now, what's really interesting here is seeing how this full duplex timing actually applies to your daily life. It opens up a whole new world of applications. Think about getting hands-free cooking help without having to scream over a sizzling pan or running water just to get the AI's attention, all because it's actively listening through the noise. Or imagine practicing a new language in a true, gentle back-and-forth chat without the anxiety of being abruptly cut off while you search for the right vocabulary word. But perhaps most notably, this unlocks seamless live translation in real time between two people. You can also research complex topics on your commute while the model delegates those heavy searches in the background. It even supports visual lookups, quietly popping up visual cards for the weather, your calendar, or stock charts on your screen while you just keep talking naturally. It integrates into your workflow, rather than demanding your full undivided attention.
Section 6. The impact today.
And here is the kicker. This full duplex upgrade, complete with 9 newly remastered voices, isn't just some research paper or a prototype locked away in a lab detailing what might be possible someday. It is shipping globally today to the roughly 150 million people who use ChatGPT voice every single week. That represents an immediate, massive shift in scale. Millions of people are going to tap that voice button, experience its ability to filter out background noise, hear it thoughtfully say, and instantly experience a fundamentally different relationship with artificial intelligence. The baseline expectation for how we talk to computers is shifting practically overnight.
Which brings us to a final, provocative thought to wrap up this explainer. With AI systems finally matching the exact rhythm, nuance, and flow of human conversation, what limits are really left on how we interact with machines? We are officially moving out of the era of clunky, turn-based chatbots and into an age of fluid dialogue and complex task delegation. I highly encourage you to test the limits of GPT-Live for yourself. Seriously, try interrupting it, take a long pause, let it think in the background, and just see how it reacts. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and stay curious.